My husband told me, if you can't trust me spending every weekend with my ex-wife, maybe we shouldn't be together. I looked him in the eye and said, you're absolutely right. The next morning I signed the transfer papers to London I'd been refusing for him. When he texted, "What are you doing this weekend?" I sent him a selfie from Heathrow Airport. The text message glows on Colton's phone screen like a neon sign in our darkened bedroom. Can't wait to see you today. It's been too long. D. My hands shake as I set his phone back on the nightstand exactly where I found it. Daisy. His ex-wife. The woman he's been meeting every Sunday for the past 3 months, claiming it's just innocent coffee between old friends. The woman who's apparently counting down hours until she sees my husband again. I slip back under our Egyptian cotton sheets, pretending to sleep while my mind races. The phone had buzzed at 5:47 a.m. Who sends messages that early unless they're thinking about someone all night? I force my breathing to stay steady as Colton stirs beside me, his hand automatically reaching for his phone like it's life support. The soft glow illuminates his face as he reads the message. I watch through barely opened eyes as a smile spreads across his features. The kind of smile I haven't seen directed at anything involving me in months. He types back quickly, his fingers moving with practiced familiarity across the screen. The response is brief, but his expression suggests it's loaded with meaning I'm not meant to understand. Morning, beautiful. His voice carries that forced cheerfulness people use when they're hiding something significant. He leans over to kiss my forehead and I catch a whiff of the cologne he's already applied. At 6 in the morning. For Sunday coffee with a friend. I murmur something non-committal and roll over, giving him space to continue whatever performance he's staging. Through the mirror on our dresser, I watch him select his outfit with the kind of care usually reserved for job interviews or first dates. The cashmere sweater I bought him for Christmas. The designer jeans that cost more than most people's rent. Everything coordinated to look effortlessly expensive. This is our Sunday routine now. For 3 months, ever since Daisy Morrison announced her return to London via a carefully casual text that Colton shared with me like it was completely innocent. My ex-wife is back in town. Might grab coffee to catch up. Such simple words for something that would systematically dismantle our marriage one weekend at a time. I remember that first Sunday clearly. Colton had dressed normally then. Weekend casual, 5 minutes to get ready, barely a glance in the mirror. He'd returned 2 hours later with stories about Daisy's photography career in New York, her struggles readjusting to London, how she needed guidance navigating the competitive art world. I'd listened while organizing our bookshelf, noting the animation in his voice when he described her projects, the way his eyes lit up discussing her creative vision. Maybe we should have her over for dinner, I'd suggested, testing the waters. I'd love to meet her properly. The suggestion had landed like a stone in still water. Colton's enthusiasm vanished, replaced by that careful expression he wore during difficult client negotiations. She's very private right now. Going through a difficult transition. Maybe once she's more settled. That should have been my first warning. In 4 years of marriage, Colton had never been protective of anyone's privacy except his own. But I'd wanted to trust him. Trusted the man who'd promised me forever in a church filled with 200 witnesses. Trusted the partner who'd built this beautiful life with me, brick by expensive brick. Our Georgian townhouse in Richmond, featured in 3 different design magazines. My thriving marketing consultancy. His corner office overlooking the Thames. We were the couple other people envied at dinner parties, the ones who seemed to have cracked the code on having it all. So I'd ignored the warning bells. Ignored the way he started caring about his appearance on Sundays. Ignored the increasing frequency of their meetings, the lengthening duration, the late-night phone calls that sent him walking out to our garden for privacy. I'd even ignored my own instincts when those calls started happening during our dinner conversations, Colton apologizing while stepping outside to help Daisy with some urgent professional crisis that always seemed to occur during our limited time together. The shower starts running and I know I have exactly 20 minutes before he emerges, fully prepared for another day in his alternate reality. 20 minutes to lie here and pretend I don't know what I know. Pretend I haven't seen the credit card charges from expensive restaurants in Shoreditch. Pretend I haven't noticed how our weekend plans always get cancelled for Daisy emergencies. Pretend I haven't started sleeping in the guest room because listening to his late-night conversations with her makes me feel sick. My phone buzzes on my nightstand. An email from my company's London office, marked urgent. The subject line makes my stomach flip. European Division Director, final consideration, time sensitive. I delete it without opening, just like I did with the previous two offers. £145,000 annually to head their European division. My own team, unlimited creative control, a chance to build something entirely my own. But accepting would mean disrupting our perfect Richmond life, abandoning the beautiful existence Colton and I have constructed together. Except our life isn't perfect anymore, is it? It's a carefully maintained illusion, like one of those movie sets that looks real from the front but reveals itself to be nothing but scaffolding and paint when viewed from behind. The water stops running. I hear him humming something while he towels off, actually humming while preparing for his weekly betrayal. The sound makes my chest tight with a combination of fury and heartbreak that I'm becoming too familiar with. I force myself out of bed and down to our kitchen, needing the ritual of making coffee to ground me in something real. The morning light streams through our custom Italian curtains, hitting the marble countertops we spent months selecting. Everything in this room speaks of partnership, of shared decisions and combined dreams. The espresso machine we bought in Tuscany. The dining table where we've hosted dozens of dinner parties. The kitchen island where we've planned vacations and discussed 5-year goals and imagined the children we'd eventually have. All of it feels like evidence of a crime now. Proof of what I'm losing to a woman who wears vintage band t-shirts and makes artistic poverty look effortlessly chic. Colton appears in the doorway, freshly showered and perfectly groomed. He's wearing that cologne again, the expensive one he claimed was a gift from a client but which I've never seen him wear for any client meeting. His hair is styled with the kind of careful precision usually reserved for board presentations or photo shoots. "Coffee smells amazing," he says, kissing my cheek with lips that taste like the mouthwash he uses before important meetings. "You're up early for a Sunday." I want to ask him about the text. Want to demand explanations for the morning routine that's become increasingly elaborate. Want to know why his ex-wife is counting down hours until she sees him. Instead, I hand him his coffee in the mug I bought him last Christmas, the one that says, "World's Best Husband" in elegant script. The irony isn't lost on either of us. "Another crisis with Daisy?" I ask, keeping my voice carefully neutral. He nods, already checking his phone again. "Gallery politics. You know how complicated the art world can be." I don't actually. Neither does he, as far as I knew until 3 months ago when he apparently became an expert in creative industry navigation. But I nod anyway, playing my role in whatever script we're both pretending to follow. He leaves 20 minutes later with a kiss that feels like an apology and a promise to be back by dinner. I watch from our front window as he walks to his car, noting the spring in his step that used to be reserved for our date nights. The car disappears around the corner, carrying my husband toward whatever fantasy he's constructed with the woman who used to share his name. I'm still standing at the window when my phone buzzes again. Another email from London. This time I don't delete it immediately. Instead, I stare at the subject line and wonder what would happen if I finally said yes to the life that's been waiting for me while I've been busy trying to save the one that's already over. The London email sits in my phone, unopened but impossible to ignore. I pour myself another cup of coffee and settle at our kitchen island, letting the silence of our empty house wrap around me like a blanket I don't want but need. 2 weeks pass before I notice the changes in Colton's Sunday preparations. It starts with the cologne. Not his usual weekday scent but something deeper, more expensive. The kind he wore on our first anniversary dinner at that restaurant in Mayfair where we couldn't afford the wine but ordered it anyway. I'm organizing our walk-in closet when I spot the Hermes shirt missing from its usual place. The navy one with the subtle pattern that I spent 3 weeks' worth of grocery money on for our anniversary. It's Tuesday and Colton's at the office wearing his standard corporate uniform. Which means that shirt went somewhere else entirely. Sunday morning confirms my suspicion. He emerges from our bathroom wearing it, paired with dark jeans that probably cost more than our monthly electric bill. The casual elegance of someone dressing to impress while pretending not to care. "Nice shirt," I comment, folding his weekend clothes into neat piles. "Special occasion?" His fingers pause on his watch clasp. "Just coffee with Daisy." You know how image-conscious the art world can be. Right. Because obviously his ex-wife's professional network requires him to dress like he's attending a gallery opening rather than grabbing a quick coffee between old friends. I watch him spend 25 minutes on his hair, using products I've never seen him touch before. When he catches me observing his reflection in the bathroom mirror, he offers a sheepish grin. Important networking, he explains, as if styling his hair like a magazine model is standard procedure for maintaining professional relationships. Must be some important networking, I say, attempting lightness while something cold settles in my stomach. All this preparation for Daisy. The transformation is immediate. His face hardens, shoulders squaring like he's preparing for battle. Don't be ridiculous, Paige. Adults can be friends with their exes without it meaning anything. The word ridiculous hits me wrong. 4 years of marriage and he's never called my concerns ridiculous before. Misguided maybe. Overthinking certainly. But never ridiculous, like I'm some jealous teenager imagining problems that don't exist. I didn't say it meant anything, I reply carefully. Just noticed you're dressing up more than usual. He softens slightly, but the damage is done. That word hangs between us like smoke from a fire we're both pretending not to smell. Monday brings lunch with Sarah at our usual spot, a cafe in Richmond that serves overpriced salads to women who lunch professionally. I need someone to tell me I'm overthinking, that marriages go through phases, that everything will return to normal once Daisy settles into her London life and stops requiring my husband's constant guidance. Instead, Sarah delivers a lecture about trust and emotional maturity while picking at her quinoa bowl. You're being insecure, she says, stirring her oat milk latte with the kind of confidence people have when they've never experienced real betrayal. It's actually beautiful that they can maintain a friendship. Shows real emotional evolution. Beautiful. That's the word she chooses while I describe watching my husband transform into someone I don't recognize every Sunday morning. But don't you think it's a bit much? Every weekend for hours at a time. Sarah's smile carries that particular condescension reserved for women who think they've figured out the secret to successful relationships. Paige, sweetie, if you can't trust your husband to have coffee with an old friend, maybe the problem isn't him. I leave feeling worse than when I arrived, Sarah's words echoing in my head while I drive home through Richmond's tree-lined streets. Maybe I am being insecure. Maybe this is what mature relationships look like. Trusting your partner completely, even when every instinct screams that something's wrong. Tuesday's business meeting with James provides a different perspective entirely. We've been partners for 5 years, building our marketing consultancy from nothing into something respectable. James knows me well enough to read the tension in my shoulders, the distraction in my responses to client updates. Everything all right at home? He asks while we review quarterly projections. I find myself describing Colton's Sunday routine, the increasing frequency of meetings, the elaborate preparation for casual coffee dates. James listens without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finish, he doesn't offer reassurance or advice. He just raises his eyebrows in that way I've learned to interpret over years of working together. The expression he wears when clients describe marketing strategies that make no logical sense. Interesting, is all he says, but his silence speaks volumes. Later, as we're packing up our laptops, he mentions almost casually, saw Colton last Sunday actually. At that new place in Shoreditch. The one with the exposed brick and the 20-pound steaks. My hand's still on my keyboard. Shoreditch? He said they were getting coffee in Richmond. James's expression grows carefully neutral. Maybe they changed plans. He was with a woman, brunette, artistic looking. They seemed. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. Looked like they were on a date. The words hit me like cold water. James quickly changes the subject to client retention rates, but the damage is done. My husband lied about where he was meeting his ex-wife, and they were somewhere expensive enough that James remembers it specifically. October arrives with longer Sunday meetings and a new development that makes my chest tight with recognition. The phone calls start happening at night, usually around 10 when we're settling in to watch television or read. Colton's phone buzzes, he glances at it and his entire demeanor shifts. Sorry, it's Daisy. Client emergency. He steps out to our garden, leaving me alone with the muted television and the sound of his animated conversation drifting through the French doors. I can't make out words, but his tone is different during these calls. Warmer, more engaged than I've heard him sound in months. The conversations stretch longer each week. 20 minutes becomes 30, then 45. I find myself timing them, lying in bed listening to the rise and fall of his voice while he paces our garden path. He laughs during these calls, Genuine, delighted laughter that makes me realize I can't remember the last time he laughed like that with me. When he returns to our bedroom, he's always apologetic but vague about the emergencies requiring such lengthy discussions. Gallery politics, client negotiations, industry connections. Daisy apparently needs guidance navigating London's competitive art scene. And my husband has somehow become an expert in creative industry management despite never showing interest in art beyond what looks impressive on our walls. What kind of client problems require midnight consultations? I ask one night after he spent an hour outside talking her through some undefined crisis. He slips back under our covers, phone finally silent on his nightstand. You know how creative types are. Everything's urgent and emotional. She just needs someone who understands the business side. Right. Because the woman who built a successful photography career in New York, one of the world's most competitive markets, suddenly needs my husband's guidance handling basic professional situations. The phone never seems to sleep anymore. It buzzes during our dinner conversations, interrupting movies we're watching together, lighting up the dark bedroom at all hours with messages from D. When I ask about the constant contact, Colton explains that Daisy's struggling with the transition back to London, needs emotional support, requires advice on everything from apartment hunting to rebuilding her professional network. She's very fragile right now, he says, as if this explains why his ex-wife requires more attention than his actual wife. Fragile. The word starts appearing frequently in his descriptions of Daisy. Fragile emotional state, fragile professional situation, fragile adjustment to London life. This woman who packed up her entire existence and moved to another country to pursue her career is apparently too delicate to handle basic life challenges without my husband's constant intervention. I start sleeping in our guest room, telling myself it's because his late-night conversations keep me awake. But the truth is more complicated. Lying next to someone while they prioritize another woman's needs over your shared bedtime feels like a special kind of torture I'm not ready to endure every night. From the guest room I can still hear him talking to her through the walls. His voice carries differently at night, softer and more intimate than the professional tone he uses during business calls. Sometimes I catch fragments. Reassurances about her talent, encouragement about her prospects, promises that things will get better. I can't remember the last time he spoke to me with that kind of gentle certainty. The guest room becomes my sanctuary and my prison. 3 weeks into my self-imposed exile from our shared bed, I discover the dark magic of social media stalking at 2 a.m. Insomnia has become my unwelcome companion, arriving precisely when Colton's breathing settles into the deep rhythm of someone sleeping peacefully despite systematically destroying his marriage. Tonight, like so many others, I find myself reaching for my phone, thumb hovering over the Instagram app with the kind of hesitation people reserve for opening medical test results. Daisy Morrison's profile loads with cruel efficiency. No privacy settings, no barriers between me and the curated glimpse into the life that's consuming my husband's attention. Her feed is exactly what I expected, artfully arranged chaos that screams authentic bohemian lifestyle. Vintage band t-shirts draped over unmade beds. Gallery openings captured in moody black and white. Coffee cups photographed from angles that suggest deep artistic contemplation. But it's the locations that make my blood freeze in my veins. Richmond Farmers Market, tagged 14 days ago. The same Sunday Colton claimed they were meeting for coffee in some generic cafe. The photo shows autumn produce arranged like a still life, but I recognize the vendor stalls, the cobblestone layout, the Victorian lampposts that line the market square where Colton and I have shopped together every other weekend for 4 years. I scroll further, my thumb moving with the mechanical persistence of someone picking at a wound. Our favorite antique shop on Hill Rise, photographed 6 days ago with the caption, "Hidden treasures in unexpected places." The image shows vintage jewelry displayed against weathered wood, the same display case where Colton and I found the Art Deco mirror hanging in our hallway. She's not just meeting my husband. She's touring my life, documenting places that belong to us, locations that hold our shared memories and inside jokes. Each photo feels like evidence of territorial conquest, a systematic claiming of spaces I thought were ours alone. The worst part is how beautiful her photography is. Each image is composed with professional skill, transforming mundane locations into something that looks worthy of gallery walls. She has an eye for finding poetry in places I've always considered simply functional. Seeing my life through her artistic lens makes me feel ordinary by comparison, like I've been living in black and white while she sees everything in vivid color. Morning brings the monthly ritual of organizing our finances, a task I've always handled because Colton finds numbers tedious unless they're attached to his quarterly bonuses. I spread bank statements across our dining room table, cross-referencing receipts with automated charges, looking for the familiar patterns of our predictable life. Instead, I find evidence of someone else's existence threaded through our accounts like foreign DNA. Lou Bernardine in Shoreditch. Pound 180 for dinner on a Sunday when Colton told me they grabbed sandwiches at a local cafe. Saatchi Gallery admission for two, purchased the same afternoon he claimed they spent walking through Richmond Park discussing her career prospects. Most damning of all, charges from the Ned's Lobby Bar in central London, dated last Sunday when he swore they had a quick coffee before he came home early because Daisy was feeling overwhelmed. The numbers don't lie, even when everything else does. I photograph each suspicious charge with my phone, building a digital case file I'm not sure I want to prosecute. When Colton appears in our kitchen that evening, loosening his tie after another day of managing other people's money, I spread the statements in front of him like cards in a poker game. Expensive coffee dates, I say, pointing to the Shoreditch restaurant charge. His reaction is immediate and smooth, too smooth like he's been preparing for this conversation. That wasn't coffee. We met some gallery owners Daisy knows from New York. Networking dinner. You know how important connections are in creative industries. The explanation comes so naturally I almost believe him. Almost. Until I point to the gallery admission charges and watch him construct another elaborate fiction about attending exhibitions to better understand Daisy's artistic influences. 2 tickets. I ask. She needed moral support. These gallery events can be intimidating when you're trying to rebuild professional relationships. Each lie builds on the previous one, creating an increasingly complex narrative that explains away every suspicious detail. His voice carries the confidence of someone who's practiced these explanations, refined them until they sound not just plausible but reasonable. The hotel bar charge requires the most creative storytelling. According to Colton, they met a potential client there who was only available for 30 minutes between flights. Daisy had been nervous about the meeting, needed his support navigating the conversation, and afterward they'd shared a quick drink to debrief the interaction. His lies come so smoothly I start questioning my own interpretation of the evidence. Maybe these charges do have innocent explanations. Maybe I'm seeing conspiracies where simple friendship exists. Maybe Sarah was right about my insecurity poisoning my perspective. Saturday morning laundry becomes an archaeological expedition. Sorting through our clothes, I realize Colton's favorite leather jacket hasn't appeared in the hamper for 3 weeks. Neither has the navy wool scarf I brought him from Paris last year, the one he claimed made him look sophisticated enough for European business meetings. When I ask about the missing items, he doesn't even look up from his newspaper. Dry cleaners. That jacket needs special care and the scarf got stained at lunch last week. But I check Somerset Cleaners on Monday afternoon, the place we've used for 5 years. The woman behind the counter knows us by name, remembers our usual pickups. She shakes her head when I describe the jacket and scarf. Haven't seen those pieces, love. Nothing of your husband's has been in for over a month. I stand in the shop surrounded by plastic-wrapped clothes that belong to other people's lives, realizing that items are disappearing from our home the same way pieces of our marriage are vanishing. Small things at first, barely noticeable, then larger absences that leave obvious gaps. That evening I start keeping mental inventories of Colton's wardrobe. Not from paranoia, but from a growing need to document the systematic dismantling of our shared life. The expensive watch he wore to last year's company party. The silk tie his mother gave him for his birthday. Each missing piece feels like evidence in a case I'm building against my own husband. Wednesday afternoon finds me in our front garden, planting tulip bulbs for spring blooms I'm no longer sure I'll be around to see. The physical work feels therapeutic, digging into soil, placing bulbs with careful spacing, covering them with earth and hope that they'll emerge beautiful when the weather turns warm again. Lovely afternoon for gardening. Mrs. Patterson's voice carries over the hedge separating our properties. She's 70-something and has lived in Richmond long enough to know everyone's business without meaning to pry. We chat about bulb varieties and optimal planting depths until she mentions seeing Colton last Sunday. Your husband's got good taste in walking routes. Richmond Park is beautiful this time of year. My hand's still on the soil. Walking routes. Oh yes, I was coming back from visiting my sister and saw him near the Albert Gate. Lovely day for a romantic stroll. The word romantic hits me like cold water. He was alone? Mrs. Patterson's expression shifts, her friendly demeanor clouding with the realization that she's stumbled into dangerous territory. Well no dear. He was with a woman. Brunette, quite pretty in that artistic way. They were walking hand in hand, looking very much like a couple enjoying the afternoon together. She describes Daisy with uncomfortable accuracy, the vintage clothing, the camera hanging around her neck, the way she leaned into Colton while they walked. Every detail matches the woman I've been studying through Instagram photos. The woman my husband claims requires nothing more than friendly coffee and professional guidance. Mrs. Patterson realizes she's delivered devastating news and quickly changes the subject to her rose bushes and their preparation for winter dormancy. But the damage is done. My neighbor, someone with no agenda beyond pleasant conversation, has provided eyewitness testimony that my husband and his ex-wife are behaving like lovers, not old friends catching up over innocent coffee. I finish planting the tulip bulbs with hands that shake despite the mild afternoon temperature. Dirt accumulates under my fingernails, and I think about how deep I've been buried in lies without realizing the soil was covering my head. Each bulb I place in the ground feels like hope I'm not sure I still possess, faith in futures that might not include the man I married. The sun sets over Richmond while I work, painting our neighborhood in golden light that makes everything look beautiful and peaceful. But beauty can be deceptive, I'm learning. The most picturesque lives can conceal the ugliest truths, and sometimes the evidence of betrayal is as simple as your neighbor mentioning they saw your husband holding hands with another woman in the park where you used to walk together. The tulip bulbs lie buried in our front garden like secrets I've planted in rich soil, waiting for spring to reveal what I've known all along. I clean the dirt from under my fingernails with mechanical precision, each scrape of the nail brush echoing Mrs. Patterson's words about romantic strolls and hand-holding that had nothing to do with professional coffee meetings. The next few days pass in a strange suspended state where I go through the motions of our life while building a case against it. Work meetings blend together. Client calls become background noise. I smile at appropriate moments during conversations I'm not really hearing, all while my phone burns with screenshots and evidence I can't stop collecting. Thursday evening changes everything. I'm reviewing quarterly projections when Daisy's Instagram story notification pops up on my phone. The image loads with devastating clarity. A gallery opening in Shoreditch, all exposed brick walls and industrial lighting. Daisy stands among well-dressed art enthusiasts, wearing a black dress I've never seen but accessorized with something that makes my breath catch. My grandmother's vintage pearl earrings. The ones with the intricate silver settings that took 3 generations to reach me. The earrings Colton borrowed last month for what he called an important client event that required elegant accessories to make the right impression. I zoom in until the screen pixelates, but there's no mistaking them. Those earrings have been in my family since 1952, passed from my grandmother to my mother to me with stories about wearing them on special occasions, about saving them for moments that mattered. Apparently, gallery openings with his ex-wife qualify as moments that matter. The timestamp shows Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Last Thursday, when Colton claimed he was working late on year-end budgets, when I ate dinner alone and went to bed early because he texted that the numbers were taking longer than expected. While I was falling asleep in our guest room, he was watching his ex-wife wear my grandmother's jewelry to art openings in neighborhoods he'd never taken me to explore. I screenshot everything with shaking fingers, adding it to the growing folder of evidence I've labeled documentation, because calling it what it really is feels too devastating to acknowledge. The photo joins bank statements, Instagram posts, and timeline discrepancies in a digital archive of betrayal that grows heavier each day. By Friday morning, the earrings are back in my jewelry box, nestled in their usual velvet compartment like they never left. But touching them feels different now, contaminated by the knowledge of where they've been, whose skin they've touched, what moments they've witnessed that had nothing to do with our marriage. Friday afternoon delivers an unexpected lifeline disguised as a phone call. My boss's voice carries excitement that cuts through the fog of domestic surveillance I've been living in. Paige, I need you to consider something extraordinary. We're not just talking about a transfer anymore. We want you to launch our entire European division. Your own team, unlimited creative control, complete authority over strategy and implementation. The salary figure makes me sit down. £160,000 annually, plus relocation assistance, plus equity options that could triple my earnings within 2 years. It's the kind of opportunity people build entire careers hoping to encounter, handed to me precisely when I need an escape route from the life I've been desperately trying to save. I know you've declined before, he continues, but this role was designed specifically for your skill set. Think about it over the weekend. London's calling and they want you specifically. For the first time in months, I find myself actually listening instead of automatically searching for reasons to decline. When Colton comes home that evening, practically glowing from another successful day of supporting Daisy's emotional well-being, I don't mention the call. The silence feels intentional, powerful. My first real secret in 4 years of marriage built on supposed transparency. He moves through our kitchen preparing dinner while describing Daisy's latest breakthrough in processing her London transition. His voice carries the animation of someone genuinely invested in another person's success, the kind of enthusiasm he used to reserve for my professional victories. I watch him dice vegetables with practiced efficiency, noting how his face lights up when he talks about her progress, her insights, her growing confidence in navigating London's art scene. When he asks about my day, his attention feels perfunctory, going through the motions of spousal interest while his real emotional investment lies elsewhere. October 15th arrives gray and bitter, matching the weather to the significance I'm the only one who remembers. Our 4th wedding anniversary. The date we promised each other forever in front of 200 guests who probably assumed we'd figured out something the rest of them hadn't. I wake up alone in the guest room, having spent another night listening to Colton's muffled phone conversations through the walls. No flowers wait on the kitchen counter. No card sits propped against the coffee maker. No acknowledgement that this date holds any meaning beyond being another Sunday in his carefully structured routine of emotional infidelity. Colton emerges from our bedroom already dressed for another day with Daisy, wearing the watch I gave him for our first anniversary and the cologne that's become synonymous with betrayal. When I mention the date while making coffee, he looks genuinely surprised. Not guilty or apologetic, but confused, like I've referenced some obscure holiday he's never heard of. Our anniversary, I say, wondering if he'll remember without prompting. Recognition dawns slowly, followed by that particular expression men wear when they realize they've forgotten something significant. Of course. I'm sorry, I've been so distracted with work lately. We'll celebrate properly tonight, I promise. Dinner at that place you love. But the damage is done. He's so invested in his fantasy life with his ex-wife that he's forgotten the actual anniversary of his real marriage. The date we stood before God and everyone we knew, promising to prioritize each other above all else. Don't worry about it, I say, and mean it more than he realizes. I'm sure Daisy needs you today. He kisses my forehead with lips that feel like obligation before disappearing into his alternate reality. I spend the day alone in our house, surrounded by wedding photos that now look like evidence of a crime I didn't know was being committed. The albums tell a story of 2 people who believed they'd found something permanent, something worth building a life around. Young faces full of hope and certainty, hands clasped like we'd never let go, eyes that saw futures we were sure we'd share. Looking at those photos now feels like examining artifacts from a civilization that no longer exists. Sunday evening finds me dialing James's number while Colton extends his anniversary celebration with Daisy into its 7th hour. We meet at an all-night diner in Putney, the kind of place that serves coffee strong enough to fuel difficult conversations and fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look tired and honest. I spread my phone across the Formica table like evidence in a courtroom. Screenshots, bank statements, timelines, even voice memos I've recorded documenting Colton's explanations for various inconsistencies. James examines each piece with the methodical attention he brings to client presentations, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates or asking me to explain context I've become too close to see clearly. Mrs. Patterson saw them holding hands in Richmond Park, I say, showing him notes I've taken from our gardening conversation. The same Sunday he claimed they had coffee to discuss her client crisis. James nods without surprise, like he's been expecting this evidence to surface eventually. When I finish presenting my case, months of documentation that paint an increasingly clear picture of systematic deception, he looks up from my phone with an expression I recognize from difficult client meetings. You know what this is, don't you? He says quietly. I nod, unable to say the word affair out loud because speaking it would make it real in a way I'm not sure I'm ready to handle. But hearing James confirm my worst fears validates months of intuition I've been questioning, instincts I've been told to ignore in the name of trust and emotional maturity. The fluorescent lights hum overhead while we sit in the kind of silence that follows devastating revelations. Outside, London continues its life while mine transforms into something unrecognizable, something that will require choices I never imagined having to make. The fluorescent lights in the diner cast harsh shadows across James's face as he slides my phone back across the table. The evidence sits between us like a smoking gun neither of us wanted to find, but can no longer ignore. "What are you going to do?" he asks, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone who knows they're standing at the edge of someone else's life-changing decision. I stare at the phone screen, still displaying Daisy's gallery opening photo with my grandmother's earrings glinting under art world lighting. I don't know yet. But that's not entirely true. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a plan is already forming. Not revenge exactly, but something that feels like self-preservation disguised as strategy. The months between October and February pass in a strange blur of parallel lives. I continue going to work, meeting clients, building campaigns that help other people sell their dreams while mine decomposes in slow motion. Colton continues his Sunday rituals, his late-night phone calls, his elaborate explanations for charges and disappearances and timeline inconsistencies that multiply like cancer cells. We exist in the same house like polite strangers, sharing space and bills and nothing else that matters. He stopped apologizing for his absences, stopped offering explanations I no longer ask for. I've stopped pretending to believe whatever story he's constructed to justify his latest betrayal. The London offer hovers in my inbox like a lifeline I'm afraid to grab. 3 times my boss calls for an answer. 3 times I ask for more time to consider, knowing I'm really waiting for Colton to give me permission to leave by finally being honest about wanting me to go. February arrives gray and bitter, matching my mood as I sit in our kitchen at 7 a.m. reviewing client proposals that feel increasingly meaningless. Outside, Richmond looks like a watercolor painting left in the rain, all blurred edges and muted colors that mirror the dissolution of everything I thought was permanent. Footsteps on the stairs announce Colton's arrival, though I can already tell from the sound that this isn't his usual weekend casual descent. These steps have purpose, precision, the cadence of someone preparing for an important performance. He emerges from our bedroom looking like he's headed to a magazine photo shoot rather than coffee with a friend in emotional crisis. The cashmere sweater I gave him for Christmas, charcoal gray Italian wool, expensive enough that I'd hesitated before buying it. Dark jeans that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. Hair styled with products I've never seen him use for any client meeting or social event in our 4 years of marriage. Another emergency situation with Daisy? I ask without looking up from my laptop. Gallery politics, he says, adjusting his watch with the practiced motion of someone who's performed this routine dozens of times. She's having trouble with a difficult gallery owner who's questioning her artistic vision. She needs someone who understands the business side of creative industries. Right. Because overnight my husband became an expert in art world negotiations, despite never showing interest in creative fields beyond choosing what looks impressive on our walls. I watch him check his reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting his collar with the kind of attention usually reserved for board presentations or important dates. The man looking back at him is someone I barely recognize. Not the person I married, but someone who's been carefully constructed to appeal to someone else's aesthetic preferences. Stay home with me instead, I suggest, closing my laptop with deliberate calm. We could drive to Bath like we used to. Find that antique market you mentioned wanting to visit. His reaction is immediate and visceral, like I've suggested something genuinely offensive. His face transforms from casual preparation to active irritation, eyebrows drawing together in the expression he reserves for unreasonable client demands. I can't abandon her when she needs support, he says, the word abandon delivered with emphasis that makes its implications crystal clear. Abandon. Apparently leaving his ex-wife alone for one Sunday would constitute abandonment. Cruel, thoughtless desertion of someone in crisis. But leaving his actual wife alone every weekend for 4 months straight is just maintaining healthy adult friendships. The irony sits between us like a live wire nobody wants to touch. What about what I need? The question comes out quieter than I intended, but it carries enough weight to make him pause in his preparations. For a moment I think he might actually consider the question. Might remember that he has a wife who's been increasingly invisible in his carefully curated life. Might acknowledge that I've been patient and understanding and cooperative while he systematically prioritized another woman over our marriage. Instead, his face hardens into the expression he uses during hostile business negotiations. Cold, calculating, designed to end conversations rather than continue them. We've discussed this exhaustively, Paige. Daisy and I are friends. Adults can maintain platonic relationships with their exes without it meaning anything inappropriate. He pauses, studying my expression with the analytical precision he brings to financial assessments that determine whether investments are worth pursuing. Actually, he continues, his voice taking on the measured cadence of someone delivering a prepared statement, if you can't trust me spending every weekend with my ex-wife, maybe we shouldn't be together at all. The silence that follows feels infinite, like the moment between lightning and thunder when the whole world holds its breath. I can hear our neighbor's dog barking at something only it can see. Sunday morning traffic beginning to build on Richmond Road. Our antique grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away seconds of our marriage with mechanical precision. But mostly I hear the sound of 4 years of carefully constructed life finally cracking down the middle, splitting along fault lines that have been developing for months without either of us acknowledging the structural damage. He's given me an ultimatum disguised as a choice. Accept his relationship with Daisy or end our marriage. Trust him completely or lose him entirely. Submit to his version of reality or face the consequences of questioning it. What he doesn't realize is that he's also given me permission to end this charade with my dignity intact. I look him directly in the eyes, seeing clearly for the first time in months. The man standing in our hallway wearing clothes I bought him, cologne he saves for another woman, styling his hair for someone who isn't his wife. This isn't my husband anymore. This is someone wearing my husband's face, living in my house, spending my emotional energy while giving his authentic self to someone else entirely. You're absolutely right, I say, my voice carrying a calm that surprises us both. His face goes through fascinating changes. Confusion first, like a computer processing conflicting information. Then alarm as he realizes this wasn't the script he'd written in his head. He'd expected tears, accusations, maybe even a dramatic scene he could later describe to Daisy as evidence of my emotional instability and his justified need for support from someone who understands him better. What he hadn't expected was agreement. Calm, rational, immediate agreement that his ultimatum makes perfect sense. Wait, he says, his confident negotiation stance faltering. That's not, I mean, we should talk about this. But I mean every word with surgical precision. I'm done with the entire elaborate performance of pretending our marriage can survive someone who's already emotionally divorced himself from it. Done pretending that love means accepting lies as truth, that trust means ignoring evidence, that commitment means tolerating systematic betrayal disguised as friendship. He stands in our hallway looking like someone who's just realized they've overplayed their hand in a game they thought they controlled. The ultimatum that was supposed to silence my questions has instead given me the clarity I've been searching for since that first Sunday morning when everything started changing. For the first time in months, I know exactly what I'm going to do next. Colton stands frozen in our hallway, his carefully styled hair and expensive cologne suddenly looking like costume pieces from a play that's ended mid-performance. The confidence he'd worn like armor while delivering his ultimatum has evaporated, leaving behind someone who looks genuinely confused about how his power play has backfired so spectacularly. We should talk about this, he says again, his voice carrying a note of panic that wasn't there 5 minutes ago. We just did, I reply, gathering my laptop and client files with the calm efficiency of someone who's finally stopped fighting against the inevitable. You were very clear about your priorities. He follows me upstairs, his footsteps quick and uncertain behind me. I can feel him watching as I move around our former bedroom, collecting the work materials I'll need for what's about to become the most important Sunday of my professional life. Paige, wait. I didn't mean we should actually separate. I was just trying to explain how important it is for you to trust me. Trust. The word that's been weaponized against me for months, used to make me question my instincts and ignore obvious evidence. Now it sounds hollow, meaningless, like calling rain dry or darkness bright. I do trust you, I say, pulling my laptop charger from the wall outlet. I trust you to prioritize Daisy over everything else. I trust you to lie about where you go and what you do. I trust you to forget our anniversary while remembering every detail of her gallery openings. He opens his mouth to protest, but I continue before he can construct another elaborate fiction. Most importantly, I trust that you meant exactly what you said downstairs. If I can't accept your relationship with your ex-wife, we shouldn't be together. So we won't be. I leave him standing in our bedroom doorway and head to my home office. The room that's about to become my war room for executing the most important strategic decision of my life. The London email sits in my inbox like a door I've been afraid to open. Afraid of what might lie beyond the familiar confines of Richmond and routine and marriage that felt safe even while it was suffocating me. But safety is an illusion when you're drowning slowly, and I've been underwater for so long I'd forgotten what breathing feels like. My fingers hover over the keyboard for only a moment before muscle memory takes over, typing words that feel like they're coming from some stronger, clearer version of myself I haven't met in years. Subject. London Division Director position acceptance. I'm ready to accept the role. When can we discuss transition logistics and start dates? Thank you for your patience with my decision-making process. I'm excited about this opportunity. I hit send before I can second-guess myself, before the part of my brain that's been trained to prioritize other people's comfort over my own advancement can interfere with this moment of perfect clarity. The response comes faster than I expected. Within 4 hours, even on a Sunday evening when most executives are home with their families. Brilliant news. Can you start in 3 weeks? We'll handle all relocation logistics, including temporary housing and permanent flat hunting assistance. Welcome to the London team. We've been hoping you'd say yes. 3 weeks. 21 days to dismantle a life I've spent 4 years building and reconstruct it in a city where nobody knows my history, where I can be someone other than the wife who wasn't enough to keep her husband's attention. Downstairs, I can hear Colton on the phone, probably calling Daisy to describe his domestic crisis and seek comfort from the woman who's apparently better equipped to understand his emotional needs than his actual wife. The conversation lasts over an hour, his voice carrying the same animated tone that used to be reserved for discussions about our future. Monday morning arrives with the predictable sound of Colton attempting damage control. His footsteps on the stairs are heavier than usual, weighed down by the kind of regret that only surfaces after consequences become visible. He appears in our kitchen wearing that particular expression men get when they realize they've overplayed their hand. Sheepish but defensive, sorry but not really, like someone who's been caught cheating at cards but wants to argue about the rules rather than acknowledge their behavior. About yesterday, he begins, adjusting his cufflinks with nervous precision. I think we both said things we didn't mean. Heat of the moment, you know. We've been under a lot of stress lately. I look up from my coffee, genuinely curious about his revisionist interpretation of events. Stress. As if external circumstances forced him to prioritize his ex-wife over our marriage. As if spending every weekend with another woman was something that happened to him rather than something he chose repeatedly. Which part didn't I mean? I ask, my voice carrying the calm interest of someone observing a fascinating psychological experiment. The part where I agreed with your assessment of our relationship, or the part where I accepted that we shouldn't be together? He runs his hand through his hair, the same gesture he makes during difficult client presentations when the numbers don't support the narrative he's trying to sell. You know what I meant, Paige. You were being... He stops himself before finishing that sentence, probably remembering how well calling me ridiculous worked out yesterday. I was being what, Colton? Emotional. Reactive. This whole thing with Daisy has you seeing problems that don't exist. The audacity is breathtaking. 4 months of systematic deception, forgotten anniversaries, missing jewelry, and financial infidelity, and I'm the one creating problems by noticing them. I signed the transfer papers, I say simply, watching his face process the information like a computer running too many programs simultaneously. The kitchen goes completely silent except for our espresso machine's gentle hum and the sound of Colton's carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. What transfer papers? London. The director position I've been offered 3 times. The one worth nearly double my current salary. I start in 3 weeks. His coffee cup hits the marble counter with a sharp crack, sending brown liquid across the surface in patterns that look like abstract art. He stares at me like I've announced plans to join a space mission or become a professional acrobat. Something so foreign to his understanding of who I am that his brain can't process the information. You can't be serious. We never discussed this. You can't just make unilateral decisions about our future. The hypocrisy is so perfect I almost laugh. The same man who's been making unilateral decisions about our weekends for months, who's been conducting a relationship with his ex-wife without consulting me about the impact on our marriage, is suddenly concerned about collaborative decision-making. Actually, I reply, wiping up the spilled coffee with paper towels that somehow feel symbolic of cleaning up messes that weren't originally mine. Especially when you've made it clear that our future isn't really a priority. That's not fair. You know how important you are to me. Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Daisy's career concerns, Daisy's emotional needs, and Daisy's social calendar have been significantly more important than anything involving your actual wife. He starts to protest, but I continue before he can launch into another elaborate explanation about the innocence of professional friendships and the maturity of maintaining relationships with ex-spouses. The house goes on the market Friday, I add, because there's no point in drawing out revelations that will be devastating regardless of timing. The blood drains from his face so quickly I worry he might actually faint. You can't sell our house. It's our home. It's where we've built our life together. It's my house, I correct gently, though the gentleness is more for my own peace of mind than his comfort. The mortgage, the deed, the down payment, all in my name alone. I bought it 6 months before we got married, remember? You helped choose the furnishings. The financial reality settles over him like a physical weight. Colton earns well for someone his age, but he's grown accustomed to our combined lifestyle, the kind of comfortable existence that requires 2 professional incomes to maintain without stress. I can't afford anything comparable on my own, he admits, his voice small in a way I haven't heard since his father's business failed during our 2nd year of marriage. I know, I say, and mean it without cruelty. But that's not my problem anymore. The man standing in my kitchen in my house wearing clothes I bought him, suddenly looks like someone I'm seeing clearly for the first time. Not the partner I thought I'd married, but someone who's been living in my space, spending my emotional energy, taking advantage of my investment in our shared future while pursuing his own interests with someone else entirely. 3 weeks suddenly feels like both too much time and not nearly enough to extract myself from 4 years of entangled finances, shared possessions, and the elaborate infrastructure of a marriage that was apparently much more important to me than to him. But for the first time in months, I feel something that resembles excitement rather than dread when I think about what comes next. 3 weeks feels like both eternity and no time at all when you're dismantling a life piece by piece. The days blur into a routine of boxes, legal paperwork, and the strange intimacy of dividing shared possessions with someone who's become a stranger. Colton moves through our house like a ghost haunting his own life, occasionally attempting conversations that feel more like negotiations than genuine communication. The morning of my departure arrives gray and drizzling, London weather that somehow feels appropriate for endings. I'm sealing the last of my boxes when the doorbell rings with the persistence of someone who has news that can't wait. James stands on my front step with his laptop tucked under his arm and an expression I recognize from our most difficult client meetings. The look he wears when he's discovered something significant that no one's going to want to hear. We need to talk, he says, stepping into my hallway without waiting for invitation. Before you leave, there's something you should see. He sets his laptop on our dining room table. The same table where Colton and I used to plan dinner parties and discuss weekend trips we'll never take. The screen loads with the methodical efficiency of someone who's spent considerable time organizing evidence. I was running social media analytics for that gallery client. James begins, his fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced precision. Daisy Morrison's name came up in the data, so I did some deeper research. What I found changes everything. The screen fills with screenshots, timestamps, and social media posts arranged with the kind of systematic organization that makes my marketing background appreciate the thoroughness even while my heart sinks at the implications. The Sunday brunches, James says, clicking through images that load like evidence in a courtroom presentation. They weren't emergency counseling sessions at local cafes. Look at these locations. The photos tell a different story than any Colton has ever shared with me. Sketch, the trendy Shoreditch restaurant with the 40-pound tasting menu. Chiltern Firehouse, where celebrities go to be photographed. The River Cafe, which requires reservations booked months in advance and costs more per meal than most people's weekly grocery budget. These aren't the kind of places you grab coffee to help someone through professional crisis. These are deliberate destinations, the kind of restaurants where people go to impress each other, to create memories, to mark occasions that matter. She's been documenting everything, James continues, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone delivering devastating news as gently as possible. Not just meals but activities. Look at this. The apartment hunting photos make my stomach turn. Not just any properties but specific listings in Richmond. Streets within walking distance of our house. Neighborhoods where she could easily become part of our daily routine. Places where running into us would feel natural rather than coincidental. But the most devastating evidence comes from what James calls Daisy's professional portfolio. An entire photography series titled New Beginnings that's been developing parallel to her relationship with my husband. The images load with artistic precision that makes their emotional impact even more brutal. Our favorite pub, the White Swan, captured in golden hour lighting that transforms the familiar space into something that looks romantic and intimate. The antique shops on Hill Rise where Colton and I used to browse on lazy Saturday afternoons, now serving as backdrop for artistic compositions that suggest someone documenting their systematic reclamation of territory. Even Richmond Farmers Market appears in her portfolio, photographed with the eye of someone who understands the emotional significance of shared spaces and wants to claim them for her own narrative. Each image is dated, James says, pointing to timestamps that reveal the scope of what's been happening. This isn't casual documentation. This is someone deliberately creating a visual record of replacing another woman's life, one location at a time. The photography is undeniably beautiful. Each image composed with professional skill that transforms mundane locations into something that looks worthy of gallery walls. But knowing the context makes every artistic choice feel like violence. Every carefully framed shot like evidence of calculated invasion. There's more, James says, his voice getting quieter as he clicks through folders organized by date and location. The timeline doesn't match anything Colton's told you. The timestamps reveal a pattern that makes 4 months of lies suddenly visible in high resolution. Gallery openings they attended together while I worked late on client presentations, believing I was supporting our shared financial goals. Weekend trips to Bath. The same trip I'd suggested for us multiple times, which Colton had dismissed as impractical and expensive. The evidence spans months, revealing not just infidelity but an elaborate campaign of manipulation that makes my previous understanding of our situation seem naive by comparison. While Colton was telling me about Daisy's fragility and professional struggles, she was documenting their romance like a victory lap, creating permanent records of moments that were supposed to be healing conversations between old friends. She's been planning this whole thing, I say, scrolling through images that show increasing intimacy and confidence. This wasn't accidental emotional reconnection. This was systematic. James nods, closing the laptop with the finality of someone who's finished presenting a case they wish they didn't have to make. I'm sorry, Paige. I know this makes everything worse. But he's wrong. Seeing the evidence doesn't make everything worse. It makes everything clear. 4 months, I've been questioning my instincts, wondering if I was overreacting to innocent friendship, letting Sarah's lectures about trust and maturity convince me that my concerns were signs of personal inadequacy rather than accurate readings of genuine threats. Now I understand that my instincts weren't just correct, they were conservative. The situation was worse than I'd imagined, more calculated and deliberate than my worst suspicions had suggested. 2 hours later, I'm standing in the departure lounge at Heathrow, surrounded by the carefully packed remnants of my Richmond life. The morning's revelations feel like final pieces of a puzzle I didn't realize I'd been solving, completing a picture that explains not just what happened but why every attempt to fix our marriage had been doomed from the start. You can't repair something when one person is systematically dismantling it while pretending to help with maintenance. My phone buzzes with a text from Colton. What are you doing this weekend? The question carries assumptions that would have been accurate a week ago, that I'm sitting in some dreary temporary accommodation, regretting my hasty decision, reconsidering the dramatic step of leaving our life together. That the reality of London would feel overwhelming compared to the comfort of Richmond routine, even if that routine had become poisonous. Instead, I look around the departure lounge filled with people heading toward new adventures, new possibilities, new versions of themselves they haven't met yet. For the first time in months, I feel something that resembles excitement rather than dread when I think about what comes next. I take a selfie against the backdrop of departure boards displaying destinations that sound like freedom. Paris, Amsterdam, Rome, and at the top of the list, London. My boarding pass is visible in frame. Genuine smile replacing months of forced cheerfulness that fooled everyone except myself. Starting my new life. I type, adding the photo before hitting send. The response comes immediately. Wait. You're actually leaving? Come home. We can work this out. But I'm already boarding, phone switching to airplane mode as London, my London, waits ahead. Behind me, Richmond shrinks to the size of a problem I used to have, while ahead lies a city where nobody knows my history, where I can be someone other than the wife who wasn't enough to keep her husband's attention. The plane lifts off, carrying me away from 4 years of carefully constructed lies and toward 3 weeks of evidence that finally makes sense of everything that never made sense before. The plane touches down at Heathrow with the gentle bump of new beginnings meeting solid ground. Through the small oval window, London spreads out beneath grey skies that somehow look more promising than Richmond's familiar sunshine ever did. I'm 32 years old, carrying 2 suitcases and a laptop bag that contains everything I need to build a life that belongs entirely to me. The flat in Shoreditch exceeds every expectation my company's relocation team had set. Exposed brick walls that have witnessed decades of London stories, industrial lighting that makes everything look like it belongs in a design magazine, and floor-to-ceiling windows that frame the city skyline like a painting that changes with every shift of light and weather. My first morning, I stand at those windows with coffee from the artisanal roastery 3 floors below, watching London wake up around me. The coffee tastes different here. Not just the beans or the brewing method, but the experience of drinking it without wondering where my husband really spent yesterday, without analyzing text messages for hidden meanings, without that constant low-level anxiety that had become so normal I'd forgotten what peace felt like. The office building in Canary Wharf hums with the kind of creative energy I'd forgotten was possible in professional environments. My new team is hungry, innovative, eager to prove themselves in ways that make me remember why I loved marketing before it became just another routine supporting a life that was slowly suffocating me. Within 2 weeks, I've implemented 3 strategies that increase client retention by 30%. The success feels different than my Richmond achievements. Not just professional validation, but proof that I can build something meaningful when I'm not constantly managing someone else's emotional crises. For the first time in months, I go entire days without compulsively checking my phone, without wondering if the person who claimed to love me was lying to my face, without feeling like I'm walking on emotional landmines disguised as normal conversations. Back in Richmond, according to mutual friends who can't resist sharing updates, my departure created exactly the kind of chaos I'd hoped to avoid but secretly knew was inevitable. Colton's carefully managed double life imploded spectacularly once I removed myself from the equation. Sarah, my former lunch companion and relationship advisor, proves surprisingly eager to share details about the aftermath of my strategic withdrawal. Daisy expected a completely different outcome. She tells me during one of her update calls that feel more like entertainment than genuine concern. She thought the Sunday sessions were courtship leading to commitment, that Colton was building toward leaving you for her. The irony is perfect. When I preemptively ended the triangle by removing myself entirely, Daisy found herself in the awkward position of being the other woman in a relationship that no longer existed. Her response, according to Sarah's breathless reporting, was swift and artistically devastating. The New Beginnings photography series that had documented her systematic replacement of my life was updated with a new collection titled False Starts, stark black and white images of empty restaurant tables, abandoned coffee cups, solitary figures in locations that had once represented possibility but now spoke only of betrayal and miscalculation. The artistic statement was clear. She'd been played just as thoroughly as I had, cast as the romantic heroine in a story where the male protagonist had never actually committed to anything beyond ego gratification and weekend entertainment. The Richmond house sold within 6 weeks. The Georgian townhouse featured in design magazines, purchased by a young couple who probably imagined they'll build the kind of lasting partnership Colton and I had pretended to create. The proceeds, after paying off my mortgage, give me the kind of financial freedom that makes London feel less like escape and more like investment in my actual future. 6 months into my new life, I receive an unexpected message through LinkedIn. A professional platform that feels appropriately neutral for what turns out to be the most important conversation I never knew I needed to have. Daisy Morrison requests a private meeting, her message carefully worded and devoid of the artistic flair that characterizes her social media presence. We agree to meet at a cafe in Covent Garden, neutral territory where neither of us has history or emotional investment. She looks smaller than I'd imagined, more fragile than the confident bohemian goddess I'd constructed in my mind during months of social media surveillance. The exhaustion in her eyes speaks to the specific kind of weariness that comes from realizing you've been cast as the villain in someone else's story without understanding the script. I wanted to apologize, she says without preamble, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it's anchoring her to the conversation. For everything. For believing things that weren't true, for participating in something that hurt you, for not asking the right questions. She pauses, staring into her cup like it contains answers to questions she's still learning to ask. Colton told me your marriage was essentially over, she continues, her voice getting smaller with each word. That you were just going through the motions until it was convenient to divorce, that you'd grown apart and were staying together for financial reasons. The audacity is breathtaking, but I find myself feeling something unexpected. Pity rather than anger. And you believed him? I wanted to, she admits with the kind of honesty that only comes after consequences make denial impossible. It made everything easier to justify. The restaurant dates, the photography project, the apartment hunting in your neighborhood. If your marriage was already dead, then I wasn't really destroying anything. The conversation lasts 2 hours. 2 women dissecting the elaborate fiction one man had constructed to serve his ego while keeping both of us invested in competing versions of the same fantasy. Colton had been playing both sides masterfully, painting me as controlling and suspicious to her while portraying her as needy and fragile to me. I've been where you were, she says as we prepare to leave. The wife wondering why her husband needs so much friendship from his ex. It's devastating, and I helped do that to you. As our conversation ends, she delivers the perfect coda to what I'm finally comfortable calling my revenge story, though revenge implies more active malice than what actually happened. He's completely alone now, she says, gathering her vintage leather jacket with movements that suggest someone who's learned to carry disappointment with artistic grace. The house sold, he's renting some dreary flat in Clapham, spending weekends watching Netflix instead of curating relationships with women who don't really know him. The irony is so perfect it feels scripted. Colton, who'd been so desperate for female attention that he'd maintained relationships with both his wife and ex-wife simultaneously, now has neither. The man who'd needed constant validation from multiple sources to feel interesting has discovered what it's like to be genuinely alone with himself. Walking back to my Shoreditch flat through streets lined with galleries and cafes that define my new life, I realize something profound has shifted in how I understand what happened to us. I'm not angry anymore. Anger requires ongoing emotional investment in someone else's choices, and I've redirected that energy toward building something that actually serves my interests. Said I'm grateful. Grateful that Colton was arrogant enough to deliver that ultimatum. Grateful that he underestimated my willingness to call his bluff. Grateful that he freed me from a marriage that was slowly suffocating everything authentic about who I used to be. Sometimes people do you the greatest favor of your life by showing you exactly who they are. Colton showed me he was someone who would choose drama over stability, ego gratification over partnership, manipulation over honest communication. And in showing me who he really was, he also revealed who I could become. Someone who refuses to accept less than she deserves. Someone who chooses herself when others won't. Someone who finally learned that you can't save a relationship with someone who's already emotionally left. Every morning when I wake up in my warehouse flat, watching London come alive outside my windows, I remember that moment in our Richmond kitchen when everything changed. The moment I stopped fighting for someone who wasn't fighting for us and started fighting for myself instead. I finally chose myself, and it was the best decision I've ever made. If this story of strategic liberation had you captivated from start to finish, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Paige delivered that perfectly calm, "You're absolutely right" response to Colton's ultimatum. What was your favorite moment from her journey? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more compelling stories of people choosing themselves. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.